and somehow manipulating information. This thing, I take it with me on planes with 100 books in it, which weigh not 1 microgram. Now, if those books don't weigh 1 microgram, there's got to be non-physical. Therefore, okay, if you think I have a soul and I'm non-physical like God, so is my palm. Oh, palm. Okay. So the thing is that this argument about the impossibility of this, that, or the other without God, I'm sorry, but this argument is completely worthless. It is absolutely obvious that we can have all of those things without God. And indeed, the most important of them, which we must have without God for the reasons that I've already sketched, is morality. And the idea that if God doesn't exist, there is therefore no such thing as morality is completely ludicrous. Because the basis of morality is in the reality of human life and the morality that we have. Which, by the way, as he's already pretty much admitted, is very different from the morality that people had in biblical times in many ways. This morality is derived from our thinking about what follows from human capacities for pleasure and pain, for thriving and for suffering. It is derived from fundamental emotions which evolution has gradually instilled into us by natural selection, because without them we could not have survived. And in particular, we could not have survived in social groups of the kind that we now have. Now, that is a perfectly understandable and sufficient explanation for what there is in morality that we all agree with. Furthermore, it has the additional advantage of also explaining the fact that, unfortunately, we don't agree about everything in morality. Many people believe, for example, in the world today, that it isn't right for women to drive a car or to go out by themselves without their husbands, their brothers, or their father's permission. Many people believe that people should not have sex if it pleases everybody concerned, because it might not please some unknown entity called God. Many people believe that certain human relations, such as the relation that you might have to your doctor or as a doctor to your patient, it is immoral for those relations to be in any way regulated by the state. Now, these are all moral beliefs that some people hold, but not everybody holds them. And I venture to say that many people here don't hold all their beliefs, all those beliefs that I've just named. Now, if that's the case, we have two things to explain. We have to explain why there's a great deal of commonality among moral beliefs, and that is easily explained in terms of the fact that we are beings that have evolved by natural selection as social beings. And we also have to explain why there are the differences, the murderous differences that exist, not only about morality, but of course about religion, which has been one of the chief causes for murderous wars in the history of humanity. And we can understand those things too, because the kinds of, if you want to call them that, moral instincts that evolution instilled into us weren't good enough to deal with situations that our ancestors, perhaps living in very small groups, needed to deal with. And indeed, sometimes they were precisely what our ancestors needed in order to exterminate one another, without which they would themselves not have survived. This is depressing, but that's the way it is. And religious people have nothing to explain this except this absurd idea of original sin, which is the truly ludicrous thought that all of us here, and everyone except the Virgin Mary, immaculately conceived, which means not that she was a virgin, but that she was conceived without original sin sticking to her the way it sticks to the rest of us. That which happened with the first man and woman, who were led on to it by this ridiculous situation. Don't eat the fruit of that fruit. Oh, well, that sounds interesting. You know, and as a comedian observed, the snake, that was a mistake. You know, the snake. Why didn't God say, if the snake comes along, don't believe him, he's a lying fucker? Right? I mean, all of these stories, they're supposed to somehow explain, they're supposed to somehow give us morality, and they're supposed to give a sense of life. That's absurd. Thank you.
Woo!
I thank the member for his remarks. At this point in the evening, our MC David will take over for a 20-minute Q&A. No? Never mind. I had the wrong itinerary. I guess we'll keep going. We're going to now hear the proposition's final summary and rebuttal to be delivered in an address not to exceed 5 minutes.
Thank you. 5-minute rebuttals now, and we've got 5 minutes to talk a little bit about what we've just heard from Dr. De Sousa. First of all, my argument nowhere asserted that Dr. De Sousa does not exist. I have a very good reason to believe that he does exist, no less than the shocking character of his language this evening. I'm saying, I've simply said that as the existentialist tradition has, I think, rightly shown, if there is no design plan, there is no prefiguring, if there is no creator, no overarching structure, then we are actually in a cosmic sea of brute factuality. On his worldview, yes, I believe that there is a difficulty in identifying the very idea of the self. We are actually confronted and eventually deconstructed into a void if there is no God. I did not say that atheists don't believe in God, or so rather believed in the God that I believe in. I simply said that we all have a divinity concept. That is, that we believe that something constitutes non-dependent or independent reality. That there is something with which we begin our thinking, even if it's just an assertion that it just is the quantum fluctuation of a vacuum or whatever, that there is a divinity concept. Our question tonight is a transcendental question. Which view of reality, personal or impersonal, irrational or rational, starting points, make sense of human experience? What provides for logic, for reason, for science, for language, for human dignity, for morality? What is the basis of science? See, Dr. De Sousa keeps talking about science, and I've shown repeatedly what's been asserted, that what science requires: causal relationships, rationality of both our minds and the universe. On what basis does his worldview possibly justify these things? I hold and contend that they cannot, and that he is borrowing constantly from my worldview. Every time Dr. De Sousa gets up, he's borrowing from a Christian theistic worldview to advance his arguments. I'm saying that our experience presupposes this God of Scripture, whether we acknowledge it or not. I am not saying that Dr. De Sousa cannot be rational. On the contrary. I'm not saying that he cannot be moral. On the contrary, I think the fact that he is moral is testament to the existence of God. I'm simply saying that were he consistent